All right. Hey, everybody. This is Carl, and thanks for joining us today. We're going to talk through a little bit of our Rated R Bible study on Lovecraft Country, and particularly the episode Sundown. We're trying to see what is the good way to kind of share this stuff and get it out there. And a couple of my friends, Kelsey and Brennen, have said that they'd be interested in talking through things, and I'm going to bring them on now. I'm looking at a picture of them. Can they give me a thumbs up if they're ready? Yeah, I got the thumbs up. All right, here we go. Hold on. Kelsey and Brennen, how are you?
Hello, good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
There we go. Thanks for jumping on. We want to say right off the bat, there are three white people about to talk about a really important African-American led piece of literature, visual literature. And we figured that we should recognize that. And also just to say, Motor City Wesley is trying to put out some resources that can really help white people do the work that they need to do. And so we're coming at it from that perspective today. Hopefully good listeners and viewers, learning something along the way and not doing too much mansplaining, white-splaining as we go. Is that fair, y'all? Is that what we wanted to say to start? Mm-hmm. Hey, why don't you guys tell folks about what you're loving about Lovecraft Country?
Oh. Well, I've always been a big fan of sci-fi, and so when I heard that this show was coming out, I got really excited. I've not read a lot of H.P. Lovecraft's works, but I've always felt there's a lot of tension in sci-fi circles because H.P. Lovecraft was an avowed racist, homophobe, sexist, generally very not likable person, but a lot of marginalized groups still find themselves enjoying his work. I know a lot of, myself included, a lot of queer fans of both his works and the works that he has inspired.
Oh, yeah.
I was just watching a video yesterday about how there's this tension between, a lot of the works that he wrote deal with elements of feeling like an outsider, which has sort of inadvertently, unintentionally fed into this, as a person, who has been made to feel like an outsider due to my sexuality or gender or race or whatever, there's a sense of kinship that is developed unintentionally. And so when I heard about the show coming out that was dealing with issues of race while discussing and grappling with the works of a racist person, I knew there was going to be something really special about how that conversation happened. And yeah.
But he was also scared of it, so he had to watch it with me. And so I just agreed to sit with him and while he watched it, but it grabbed my attention and drew me right in. So now I've been watching along too.
Oh, yeah. I love it. And I think there's something totally kind of valid and valuable about being introduced to a kind of a problematic, creator from the vantage point of the reclamation work, right? The new lens. And that's how I didn't know anything about H.P. Lovecraft. I wasn't enough of a sci-fi fan to know even that his work existed. And so this was totally refreshing. And it was really funny because my wife was reading the book and she kept saying, you have to read this. And I kept saying, I don't have time to read things, COVID or something. I don't know. I'm not sure what my excuses were. But then as soon as this first episode came out, just immediately thought that this is one of those pieces that is not just good, but is important. Mm-hmm. For me, there are some times when there are these kind of shows or movies or books that they're just really important, Mm-hmm. And I'm starting to build this little library, which this has become kind of front and center of these shows that are really important, I think, to look at now in light of some of the work being done in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement. And, those include lots of things by Jordan Peele, Get Out and Us, and Lovecraft Lovecraft Country and Woke also is another one, kind of exploring this this moment of awakening across the country. So I love that they're doing it with horror and sci-fi. I just it's I think it's a great front porch for a lot of people to explore some of this stuff.
Yeah, there's a show on Peacock. I don't know the new streaming services very well, but it was a BBC show whose name I'm gonna blank on. But it's based off a book series or book that is the premise is, what if in the 1400s the empires of Africa had invaded Europe and creating a an entirely new future, but the basic conceit is, what if modern racism happened towards white people from people of color, and the point of the show is for people to watch it and be like, what a dystopian nightmare. Well, that's this dystopian nightmare that we're currently living in, and sort of forcing people to grapple with those feelings that we get. So we're, as privileged white people, we're allowed to get used to the state of the world being a nightmare because it's not as nightmarish for us. And so I think horror is the best venue to present that, because it forces you to be in a sense of fear and anxiety. And then when that anxiety, like the safety of that controlled anxiety when you're watching fiction is over, you're left with the feeling of, oh, maybe I should be feeling this anxiety all the time, because I can see how the real world is reflected back through this, more intentionally horrifying mirror.
Yeah. Well, and like with Lovecraft Country, it's like there's like two monsters, like the white people and the actual monsters, and like almost like whenever there's interactions between both of them, it's like equally scary for like, you're equally scared for the characters, whether it's like a white racist chasing them with a gun or this like horrible monster.
Yeah, absolutely. And the vampire dogs or whatever, at least there's a whistle that you can tame them for a time. And the white people, not so much, right?
Yeah.
They're just always out to get. Okay, well, we might be jumping ahead a little bit, but thanks for kind of tapping into what I think also is part of a grand tradition of using this this format. I mean, C.S. Lewis sci-fi trilogy has these moments of having to recognize who the real monsters are. And so I think it's kind of this tradition, and even in the biblical tradition itself, using monsters and horror as a way to explore how we, our behavior in the real world and our responsibility to it. So we use that in the introduction to this little study guide that we're putting out for folks that are kind of part of our network. You see at the bottom of the screen here how you can jump on for as little as $1 a month, and then your church can get these downloads and use them with your young adult group and or whoever would like to engage this way. We're trying to be grown-ups about talking about our faith, even if it involves curse words, because it's not important if we say shit. It's important what we do with our faith in Jesus. And so if that's not for you, then see you next time. But it's important for us, and it's important for the college students that we're working with to be a little bit more real about how we communicate. So I'm going to bring up the kind of the questions, and let's just talk through some of them as we see fit. And we'll be using this video as a way to kind of introduce how these guides might be able to be used out there in the world. Okay. Let me do this, and there we go. And hopefully people can kind of see that. This one is called Absurd Ass Monsters. And the basic conceit is, let's really think about who the monsters are and how absurd each can be. So at the beginning, I'll just I'll put some of these questions to us and we can talk through it. So the hosts of this Lovecraft Country Radio is kind of this talkback podcast about each episode, which I found to be even more enlightening about kind of where the folks who made this show and their friends are coming from. So Ashley C. Ford and Shannon Houston are talking, and they're exposing white supremacy's tendency to set norms for what is good and right and possible. In the show, there's racist police officers who refuse to acknowledge that the threat of the vampire dogs chasing them, while forcing black characters to put themselves in danger to save the day. So What monsters in the real world have you been able to ignore or deny because of your privilege?
Well, I guess I'll throw myself under the bus right away. So, growing up in Albion, Michigan, I was definitely one of the more, my family's not well-to-do, but being a middle-class family put me in one of the higher class spaces of the people that went to my school, and when that's just sort of all is that there are us, the normal kids, and then there are the kids that are, oh, why are they like this? Why can't they be XYZ? Why can't they be like us? And sort of knowing that it's like subconsciously knowing, because they are not afforded the same privileges due to their parents' finances. But when you're a teenager and you're dumb and you're trying to navigate high school, it's you don't have time to let me rephrase that. If you're privileged enough to ignore it, you don't feel like you have time to really grapple with the real questions of that. But having grown up and realizing just how much classist nonsense lives rooted in here that I'm still trying to work through. And it's when you don't have to navigate those issues when because the world has afforded you such privileges, it's really easy to just prioritize everything else, because it's to make an anecdote about moving into a new house. It's like we have a lot of boxes that we still haven't unpacked, because it's just we get used to them just being in the corner or in a closet, because we're if it's not in the way, we don't have to unpack it.
There's a lamp on top of it now. We just got to leave it there.
Exactly.
Suddenly an end table.
Yes. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Kelsey?
I think for me, like I growing up in Clarkston, and as a middle class suburb of Detroit, there is I didn't grow up with a lot of diversity, and so I think of the monsters for me are the ways that folks like me, or as I'm growing up, I was able to say oh well, I have oh well, we do have this one, literally the cliche, I have this one black friend, or I have I have good intentions, and so I'm fine. I'm not racist. My friends aren't racist. My parents aren't racist. Because we have good intentions, and I've never seen them say anything or do anything bad, or
the
actively
the cartoonish racism.
Yeah.
Right.
You'd see in, I don't know, Tom and Jerry or whatever when we were kids on TV, but and so I think of that, of the monsters that we're able to just kind of, it's kind of like the box that we get used to not unpacking, but the things that are just acceptable, and the level of racism, internalized racism, that's just acceptable in our minds, that we then have to, when you're pushed to actually face those internalized racisms, that there's a lot more to deal with, and it is opening that closet door and realizing that there's a monster in there, and then shoot, that's me. And I think there's definitely other big monsters in the world, but I think some of those are the most insidious, the ways that we've managed to hide our monstrous tendencies, and just create them to be normal and fine.
On a bit of a tangent, sorry, when you said other things in the world that one of the things that I've always this is completely deviating, but one of the things that I've always felt is that living in Michigan, it's really easy to ignore climate change, because we live where all the fresh water already is, and we live in a place that already has massive temperature fluctuations. So it's oh, it's a slightly warmer summer than normal. That's
climate privilege.
oh, it's a colder winter than normal. That's fine. You know, we're not living with, you know, the real effects of hurricanes or droughts or fires. You know, that's a privilege of geography. You know, living in a place that is, you know, it's far enough north that it's gonna, you know, it's already pretty temperate, and it's, you know, they always talk about like, well, what will happen when you know, when people don't have access to fresh water? Well, we have a fifth of the world's fresh water that's already a liquid, you know, as opposed to the, you know, in ice. So we're good, you know. So there are a lot of things that are easier to be like, well, it doesn't affect me right now. Let's push that down the road.
Well, and I think that's like partially that speaks to like the geography of racism too, right? Like we're here in the northern states, and so we can more easily like stand by that. Like we're part of the union. We are fine. Our people fought against racism, or, you know, like even I think growing up in the Metro Detroit area of like, we like ignore the ways that we talk about like Detroit or Pontiac or those other places and think about like, oh, well, you know, like, oh, I don't mind going downtown to go to a baseball game or whatever, so I'm fine. Or, you know, there's just a lot of that like hidden undercover racism in the North that like we don't acknowledge is real. Like we were still like the northern people have always still been racist. We just pretend that we're fine.
Yeah. So on the desktop of my wife's computer, there's this little PDF, and it's a scan of a last will and testament of an old, way back, generations back, and gentleman who was great grandfather, farmer in Arkansas, and part of the will is about where the enslaved persons go. So it's, you know, we're fast forward to 2013 or whatever it was, and we as a white family have the resources to come into Southwest Detroit and snatch up a fairly affordable home to live here with all the good intentions of being a good neighbor, but also we're a white family moving in with resources. I mean, the work that we have to do about gentrification is real. And I part of this, you know, kind of work and watching a movie like this is to recognize those connection points between the two, that generations past participating in the kind of the economic racism of the day probably had some economic benefit in our own lives, you know, right now. And so it really is important about what we do with such an inheritance, you know, and we're trying to work on plans to do that. But for us, the most important thing is don't pretend like it doesn't exist. In this moment where these characters are hiding in a cabin and those police officers are saying it must have been bears or whatever, you know, I think is a great, it's just poignant example of like, nope, it's fine. We just you have to go run fast and then, you know, we'll be safe or whatever.
You know, I love the delivery of Uncle George saying you have to shoot him, like very calm, very, you know, like for some, like I don't know why it sort of elicits a chuckle from me. I think just because it's such an absurd situation and he's still managing to stay calm.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, that's the fight in a nutshell, is, you know, telling people in authority, you have to do this thing. It's happening right now in front of you, and if you don't, it will
have
bite your face off. You know, there will be negative consequences for all of us. But there's, you know, it's like, you know, even then, even in the face of the literal horror of a person being transformed into a monster, you know, there's still a like, well, I don't know what to do.
He's still my buddy.
Yeah, he's still, you know, I can't do anything about this. You know, and, you know, whether it's I can't do anything about my friend turning into a monster, or I can't do anything about institutional racism, you know.
Yeah, some of my best family members are institutional racists.
Yeah.
I can't confront them on Thanksgiving.
Turkey.
Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you. So if you haven't seen kind of this episode, it kind of this is their entry point into these kind of strange lands, right? And they're literally on a road trip and going through these towns where it is this kind of hyped up, kind of fictionalized, mythical version of sundown towns, but sundown towns were real, and some might say are still real. But the idea that there are laws on the books saying that, you know, if you're an African American person in this town after dark, we are legally allowed to shoot you. The hosts on the podcast for Lovecraft Country Radio tie in some of that into this idea of kind of the white gaze. That part of what has been kind of instituted into the like identity of white people in America is that we are responsible to keep our eyes on you, you know, to keep you in check if you're a person of color. And usually, and throughout history, we do that with the permission to move toward violence if we determine that you're out of line. So if we're making a moment here, you know, we're sitting down to watch Lovecraft Country in a way to try to learn. Are there ways in which we could be participating in kind of the existing version of the white gaze, or, you know, how can we move in a different direction by kind of consuming this media and thinking about it, talking about it, without kind of just continuing the kind of harmful white gaze of the past? Is insight on that?
One of the things that comes to mind for me is, I think, the important attitude for us to come at watching it is to just watch it to see what we can learn from it. So I think, you know, a lot of media, a lot of people consume, watch it, and then like with this eye ready to like critique it, or like, oh, well, that part wasn't good, or they could have done this to do this better, or I don't know, any of those kinds of things. And so I think part of it for me is to just watch it to learn, and recognize the moments or the things that like make me feel uncomfortable, and not let that like turn into something that like it's about the show or about the people in the show, or, you know, anything like that, but that it's probably my own internalized racism at play. And I think that that's maybe like the biggest thing is to, and like engaging in conversations like this that are more like focused on what can we learn from it, rather than like, let's talk about the show and like in like more of a like critical lens.
I'm going to pare it back just make sure I'm on the same page. So what you're saying is that, you know, there are two sort of polar extremes of engaging with media, and there's the, you know, the hypercritical, like, well, there's a plot hole here and this doesn't make sense, and, you know, just like trying to nitpick everything, you know, the everything wrong with style, just like I'm gonna name 400 little tiny nothings to try to put holes into it. And then there's the passive viewer, which just, you know, you sit down, you watch it, you go,
That's fun.
That was fun, and then you just sort of move on without really engaging with it in a way. So you're just talking about like how, you know, the importance of finding a balance where you're thinking about it critically, but in a way that is, it's critical thinking without being critical. Like you're not just trying to tear it apart. You're trying to like
learn from it,
engage with it, and grapple with the ideas after the episode has ended. You know, engaging in conversations where you can, you know, really discuss what you've seen and what it means.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, following the lead that's been given to you by these creators. Yeah. I think there is one other that white people have done in the past, which is the co-opting of African American culture. And that's partly where I start to get worried that if I am a fan of this show, what are the ways that I start to co-opt it for my own benefit, rather than saying rather than following it with kind of a good heart and honoring of their work. So I think that's where I need to stay vigilant in my own life. How am I not just turning this into a thing that I can use? And so
Yeah.
so I turn around and build a Bible study off of the episode. I don't know. I don't know if I'm following my own advice.
I think one of the things that I've been holding to as well is so I've been seeing some of, not too many because it is kind of like a niche genre and it is also like on HBO. So that's kind of a hindering of everybody being able to see it. But I've had people that are like on my Facebook feed, talking about the show, and I'm kind of more, and I don't know if this is right, but this is, I guess, I don't know, what I've been trying my best to do what is right is when it is like, I can see that it's someone who is Black that has been talking about it. I don't engage in that. Like, I'll like read the comments and I'll enjoy the like fan talk about it. But I've like particularly like chosen not to like then also be like, oh yeah, I love this show. It's so great for all these reasons. This is because like that's not my space. Like it's their space to like enjoy it for what it is for them, because it is a show that is like so much about like Black joy and like shining light on these things that have been hidden for so long. And so I don't know if that's actually the right thing to do, but that's one of the things that I've been trying is to just like kind of take a step back and be like, this isn't my time to be like entering into that space. Like it can just be theirs, and that's okay.
To reference a few episodes later on, you were trying to not be the department store ladies. Like, we're all gonna go to the south side, and we're gonna invade this space and and try to colonize it for our own our own benefit.
Yeah.
Right. And the podcast hosts talk about the first important thing to do if you're a Black person in a white room is to tell all the white people to leave the room. Another kind of echo of some of the scenes coming up in the show. Yeah. Well, this is a Bible study, and so we're trying to kind of find those points of connection. In Matthew 22, we get this reminder of the most important parts of being a Christian. Right, love God and love your neighbor. This dark arts cabal. What are they called? These white guys?
What is
magicians? What is the name of
They're the Sons of Adam?
Sons of Adam.
Sons of Adam, right? Is a fascinating combination of this kind of we are faithful. I mean, there's this weird combination, the tension between, kind of we going back to Genesis. We just want to get back to the Garden of Eden, and we are doing it so that we can become these kind of superpower master race people, right? So in light of the real teaching of Matthew 22, when we look at Lovecraft Country and the white people in it, they tend to love themselves and to seek the use of others for their own selfish gains. So in the real world, out here, beyond Lovecraft Country, when have you really seen Matthew 22 lived out rightly? And maybe the counter to that is, when have you seen the world descend into a kind of Lovecraft Country style refutation of Christian teaching?
I feel like that second question is so much easier than the first.
Right.
Oh no.
I know. I mean, I think like that's so much of that second question is happening right now. And I think, so much of what we see is people not loving neighbor, or I think part of what you were saying kind of triggered some thoughts in my mind of like that the sons of Adam in a way are like loving God, but in a way that they're trying to love God so that they can use God for their own gain.
That co-opting notion that you brought up.
Right.
And so I think that's like, there's so much of that going on, like people using their faith and they're in God and like claiming God in order to like decide for themselves what loving neighbor looks like, or deciding for themselves what is best.
Or on the other side, you see people taking advantage of those who are faithful for their own end. I was recently watching a deep dive into the current very troubling growth of the QAnon conspiracy theory.
Yes.
Familiar? The notion that the world is being controlled by a cabal of Satan worshipping Democrats and
much the Sons of Adam. Really.
and only Donald Trump and his cronies can save us. But one of the things that I've seen is a lot of you look at, there are a lot of politicians who look at movements like that are faithful in a very specific way, but they're very faithful to this notion, and then politicians using that to try to grab some immediate power, being like, oh, I agree with your fringe beliefs, so vote for me and I'll make sure this even if this very sort of cynical co-opting of other people's faith, whether it be religious or conspiratorial, to try to grab some quick and easy political gains.
Mm-hmm.
It's
there's just a lot of bad.
Oh, it's
where's the good?
So troublesome when you can skip the what's the good example in the world, and you go, well, let's start with the bad ones.
I know. I guess I think there are like little pockets where we see that people are loving their neighbors well, and I mean it's not like a universal thing, but I think that's maybe how we see God at work these days, is like through individuals and not as a whole. So that's maybe fine. I don't know. But I think of like right now being in the midst of pandemic, that like I hear the stories of those who have been really careful and conscious about how they're interacting with others. That's wearing their masks, or not going to the store or whatever. And like a lot of people that are perhaps there are a lot of people who are using their privilege for bad, but there are also people that are using their privilege of like, if they know that they can't afford to get their groceries delivered, or to do things that take more money in these days, like they're taking those opportunities to try and keep everyone as safe as possible. Or I mean, you think of all of the essential workers and those folks that are putting their lives on the line so that we can keep living as normally as we can. I don't know. I mean, it's just like, I think of my church's like food pantry, who they have like gone in overdrive to try and get food to families, and like over the summer when school wasn't happening, getting extra food donations for kids packs, and seeing how that like also like trickles down. Like they were getting more donations because other people were seeing that there was a need, and so they were donating more than they ever would have before. And I think there are examples. It's just harder to see them in the midst of the sparks of light these days.
I think it's not as clear as so stay with me, but I would say that the notion of Black Lives Matter is just is sort of a grabbing this country by the shirt collar and saying, hey, love your neighbor, god damn it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reminder, it's a necessary reminder that we have, like we said, there's so much bad. There's been this long history of not caring for those who are different, and Black Lives Matter is, it's been sort of forced to exist because people very clearly need to be reminded that Black lives do in fact matter. And a group like that has what can only be described as a very obvious type name, like Black Lives Matter is as obvious, should be as obvious as we breathe air and we stand on the ground, but people are raging against it, and it's a simple call to action. Black Lives Matter, so treat them like they do. And I think that's there's it's both I'm trying to avoid getting into making myself sad by thinking about the fact that a group like that needs to exist, when any just society would just accept that is fact and that would be the rule of law. But the fact that there is this movement that is saying, no, enough is enough, we are going to demand that you treat us like we matter, and that there are people who are different, people like us who support the movement, who are like, you're right, let's come together and let's try to build a future that isn't the way that things have been.
Yeah, in a restating of what we've heard the Black Lives Matter movement say, no neighbor is loved unless these neighbors are loved. Mm-hmm. And it's a group of people that are willing to go out on the streets in no small danger to themselves to make sure that we remember that, or that we reclaim it. So I appreciate that, Brennen. It's a good reminder of even when even when the goodness in the world looks a little bit raucous, and bullhorns are involved. It is there. Well, there is more in the conversation guide, but I did want to land on one last question that I'd love for each of you to respond to, and then I want to get a couple plugs in at the end where people can find you and the work that you're doing, the ministry that you're involved with. So we'll end there. But in the final scene here in Sundown, there is this moment where Letty, regardless of the fact that she's just totally scared shitless, is running from the combined monsters confronting her back in the cabin, but she's just reciting the 23rd Psalm. Mm-hmm. Later on, we get a sense that her faith life is complicated, and so but the Psalm is kind of deeply embedded in her as a piece of literature that helps her soul in that moment. So I wonder for you all, what is that scripture, literature, and poetry that holds you together even through times of trial?
Lately, we've been doing a study at my church on a book that uses the Serenity Prayer. And so I think that's one, for myself, but also just like that's like one over time for a lot of others has been one of those type pieces of, I guess it would be literature, poetry, prayer. But that God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So I think that's, in times like these where it's this like societal upheaval, that's a really powerful one. But for me personally, I've also, in a lot of times in my life, and now it's kind of cheesy because it's a lot of people really love this one, but I think of Jeremiah, the 29:14, for I know the plans I have for you, plans for you to prosper and to have hope, and plans to give you a future. And I think that's one that has, in my dismal days, that has been one that I can hold on to know that even no matter what's going on in my life, the bad stuff isn't from God. God, his plans for me to continue, has plans that I can tap into to find hope and goodness in the future, and that there is hope for that. And so that's fine.
I'm gonna be honest, I spent the entire time while you were talking trying to think of one for myself.
A song. I feel like it's music.
That is the I would say that unfortunately I don't think I have a specific thing, and I'm sure as soon as we get off this call I'll be like, dang it, I remembered. But, for me it's I really I'm the kind of person that if I'm feeling sad I will listen to sad music. If I'm feeling happy I'll listen to happy music. Or I'm feeling, music has a strong place in my, my emotional sphere. So I don't know if there's exactly a specific song or artist that I will go to when I'm feeling any sort of way to try to feel any sort of different way. But yeah, that's something I definitely, I will cling to when,
I really like Sufjan Stevens.
I do.
And I think you've talked to me, not to just like answer for you, but
no, go ahead.
But you've told me a lot about like you really appreciate Sufjan because like one of the things and the key themes that you've at least highlighted to me is that he does have this like really real faith in his music, and that there's not this like, it's not the like garbage, contemporary music that's on the radio that's all just like happy Jesus, you must be happy all the time. Yeah. But
it's either I love Jesus with all my heart,
or like Jesus is my boyfriend, or whatever,
or life was hard, but then Jesus saved me, and water themes. It's the real stuff of like, my mother has died, and everyone tells me that religion is the way to cope with grief, but there is no shade in the shadow of the cross, and I am sad, and it's the real the real guilt of like am I bad in my faith when the things that everyone tells me that how faith should work doesn't work. It's the it's the real grappling with faith, and a sense of like like one of my favorite songs to make me get emotional is called Kazimir Pulaski Day, and it's about recalling a childhood friend who died from bone cancer. Yeah. And one of the lyrics is every Tuesday night of the Bible study, we lift our hands and pray over your body, but nothing ever happens. It grapples with these ideas of like sometimes you really need God to be in your corner, and God doesn't show up the way you expect or you feel like you need in the moment. But how do you still come out the other side and still have faith in those moments? And that's that's the kind of stuff that like I really resonate with, because that's a lot of my I always joke with Kelsey that if you had told me that I was gonna fall in with someone who was not only really intent on their faith with Jesus, but also a leader in that, I would have not been I would have been very surprised. So just because I have a much more, hey, do you mind if I yell at God for a minute kind of then lean my head out of a window and just be like, ah. that's the faith that I sort of find myself in. So yeah, thanks for answering for me. You really helped me.
Well, here they are, Kelsey and Brennen, and if they're ever running away from combined monsters of racism and vampire dogs, they'll be singing through the forest the Serenity Prayer and songs from Come on Feel the Illinois. Where can people find you guys out there in the internet world if they want to find out more about the ministries that you're a part of, the work that you're doing, the causes that you care about?
You have more handles than I do.
So if you want to find me, I'm at Brennen French Arts on Instagram, and I think also on Twitter. I don't use Twitter as much, but I'm trying to do that. So that's I'm an artist for, I should have probably said that up front, but so that's where you can see the art that I'm doing. But you've got more stuff.
I pastor at Hopkins and South Monterey United Methodist Churches in very small town, Western Michigan. So I don't get to actively do a lot of this big work, but I am working in little ways as I can. And this is I'm still within the first few months of my time here, so still getting to know everybody. But I am on Facebook, and I don't really have like a public page. But if you want to hear what I've been preaching, trying to sprinkle a little bit more social justice into my Sundays, the Hopkins United Methodist Church YouTube page I've been posting all of my sermons on there. So my hope is to continue to sprinkle in some more social justice and maybe get this congregation doing something about some things.
So you go there, subscribe, and hit the bell, right? So
yeah, there you go. You'd
comment,
be like
subscribe.
Our 4th subscriber, so that's.
If you hurry up, you can be the first person to watch some of the videos. So I don't think commenting first is still popular. I think that sort of ended in within probably a decade ago. I'm old now.
So. Anyway,
it's all brand new or new to us again. This whole kind of world. So, well, Brennen and Kelsey, thanks so much for doing this. And we are doing a soft launch for kind of a Sunday evening collection of the devotionals and things that we've been collecting over the course of the previous two weeks or so. Would you guys be okay if I grabbed a clip or two of our conversation and use that as part of our witness time during that? For those that are looking for it, there'll be one of our more recent versions of kind of Lectio Divina that we've been doing, just reading. We call it Aryawata, which is just it's the Aramaic for lion's den. So it's like diving 3 times into the wildness of God's word, kind of thing. And a short witness of some friends that are doing good things, and some good conversations to share, and some music where some of our students and young adults are helping us just have some music to listen to. So watch for it on Sunday at 8, and this is kind of the preview version. And then hopefully on the 4th, we're going to be connecting in with some of our US2 missionary folks and connecting with them. So anyway, thank you. Watch Lovecraft Country, listen to Lovecraft Country Radio, and enjoy the monsters, and confront the monsters in your own life of your racism, if you would be so kind. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you later.
Take care.
Bye, girl.
Bye.